Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
You're listening to Giles Brown on Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain. The Nazi and the Psychiatrist, Hermann Göring, Dr. Douglas M. Kelley, and the fatal meetings of minds at the end of World War II. It is a fascinating book. It's been turned into a major motion picture, which stars Russell Crowe and Rami Malek, and it's going to be premiering in Spain and the UK in November. I am delighted to say that the man behind the book, Jack El-Hai, joins me live on the line now. Jack, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, and thanks so much for having me with you.
Oh, indeed, the pleasure's on. Whereabouts are you, by the way, today? Where do we find you?
I live and work in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the upper Midwest of the U.S.
Well, it's good to have you with us. It is a fascinating book. It's a look at evil and how we view evil in a context that couldn't be more high stakes. Explain to the listeners a little bit about the backgrounds to this.
This book follows the time of a psychiatrist, a U.S. Army psychiatrist named Douglas Kelley, as he serves in Europe during World War II in a hospital mainly treating victims of what we would today call PTSD. And then at the end of the war, he is called to the places where the Allies are holding the top German command, the people who are going to be defendants in the first Nuremberg trial, the International Military Tribunal. And Dr. Kelley was young at the time, in his early 30s. All of these Germans that he was dealing with in prison, a total of 22 of them in that first trial, were considerably older than him, with one exception. And it really tested his abilities as a psychiatrist to be with them. His task there, first in Luxembourg and then in Nuremberg, was to simply evaluate whether these men were fit to, psychiatrically, mentally fit to stand trial. However, he saw this as a wonderful opportunity that he knew many other psychiatrists and psychologists were drooling over, to spend lots of time in groups and one-on-one with these defendants who had committed or were charged with, at the time, with committing some of the worst crimes in military and human history. And so he set for himself a deeper task, which was to determine whether these men shared a psychiatric disease or trait that made them the guys who would commit heinous crimes. And so the book follows him through all of that and through the end of the trial and then in his life afterward.
So it was important, of course, for the Allies for this trial to be seen to be a just trial, a fair trial, because obviously other combatants, perhaps the Soviet Union, were more used to show trials, and obviously there'd been horrendous show trials with the Nazis themselves. So this was presumably to make sure that they were fit to stand trial.
And that was important because no one wanted this to look like a kangaroo court, a trial in which the outcome is predetermined, and that simply a victor's trial over the losers. And that's why I think my book and the movie Nuremberg has resonance today because we're grappling with some of those same questions. The International Military Tribunal in 1945-46 set a precedent, a way to deal with people who engaged in serious crimes like crimes against humanity, genocide, war crimes. And we need that kind of guidance today. And when Dr. Kelley returned to the U.S., after his time in Nuremberg, he laid out some guidelines for what everybody in every country, can do to try and prevent people like this from attaining power again. He saw it as a continuing threat, not something that had been ended by the conclusion of the war.
Because one of the troubled things is, this is Germany. This is a nation that has given us Beethoven. It's given us, it's given us Faust, etc. It's given us great works of art, great universities, and it is difficult, perhaps, it is easy to say, there's just an evil Nazi gene in there, rather than look into thyself and find out what the problem is or what the conditions could be. Because these aren't mindless people. These are the guys at the top of the Nazi hierarchy.
More frightening to find out, as Dr. Kelley did, that these men did not suffer from some kind of common or shared psychiatric illness. They were all within what he considered to be the normal range of mental health, with one exception. And that to Dr. Kelley was really scary, because that meant that there were more people, a lot more people like them out there in every country from every era, and that those people were a constant threat that we had to be on guard about.
And of course, Göring has a massive ego. He's been a Reichsmarshal. He's been number 2. He's a war hero from the First World War. He obviously enjoyed this battle of minds, as it were, seeing it as a game, saying he could prove his intellect, etc.
That was one of the aspects of the story that surprised me as I did my research, how much of a cat and mouse game, battle of minds, it was between Dr. Kelley and Hermann Göring. It was an interesting matchup. These two men were similar in a lot of ways. They both had big egos, highly intelligent, thought highly of themselves. And when I've been discussing their pairing with Dr. Kelley's son, Doug Kelley, who was an important source in my book, we jokingly referred to their matchup as King Kong versus Godzilla, because they were both so formidable, and they were both manipulating each other all the time. So Göring knew that he was going to face trial. He did characterize it as a trial of the victors over the losers, and that there was really no moral questions hanging in the trial. And he believed that he would also probably be sentenced to death. So he used the trial as a platform to get his ideas out there and justifications, and for how the war was conducted, how Germany conducted the war, and their loyalty to Hitler, and all the rest of it.
It's interesting, isn't it? You managed to, you've been dealing with Dr. Kelley's son. You get the Holy Grail. You get primary sources, notes, which obviously. So we're not talking from a caricature of evil Göring, great American. You can see how his mind processes day to day as he's in this struggle against Göring.
And that's how this story began for me, because I had heard about Dr. Kelley. I was curious about his career at Nuremberg and afterwards. And so I set out in pursuit, trying to find his living family members. And I did catch up with Doug, the son. I asked him if he had anything of his father's. He said yes, and he invited me to come to his home in Northern California at the time. So I went, and Doug opened the door, and there in his living room were 15 boxes of stuff, mostly documents, but also some artifacts like a vial of the pills that Hermann Göring was addicted to, a drug called pericodine, and many other interesting artifacts. So the start of this story for me was medical records. Dr. Kelley's testing results results from the tests he gave to the Germans. He was a big advocate and user of the Rorschach inkblot testing, and many other kinds of tests, and extensive interviews that he did with all of the 22 who were captives in prison at the time. And so I began this story, this research, from a medical perspective. It was not a perspective that Göring was a monster or that any of the others were. It was, what did a psychiatrist learn about them, and what conclusions did he reach?
Because we all think about the Second World War as being a long time ago, but it's actually just through the veil. And when you actually lean into the box and pick up a notebook or an artifact that has a place in history, I mean, the feeling must have been very much, it's the Indiana Jones effect, isn't it, for a researcher, because you have primary sources. It must have been an incredible feeling.
It was. I remember at the time that it was a mix of being astounded, feeling astounded, and also I felt slightly nauseated, because I knew that here were 15 boxes that I was going to have to go through in great detail from top to bottom of each box. And I knew that there was an incredible story right away, and that I wanted to be the one to write it. So it was an opportunity that I had never had before to have access to a large group of documents that historians had never seen and that had been sitting in Kelley family basements for decades.
Presumably, the Allies just want to say, yeah, he's okay, send him for trial. We can get this thing wrapped in a week. He may have had addictions before, but basically, he and the other 22, 23, whatever, you can send them to trial. Let's go. Was he? Was he being hassled to speed up to get these men? Because obviously, you could spend 3 or 4 years with Göring trying to find the nature of quote unquote evil, or what happened and how he did it. But he had a set period of time, obviously.
Yes, Dr. Kelley was under pressure, because this self-imposed investigation that he was on, really to find out what made the Germans tick, was unofficial. The officials of the court and people involved in the prosecution and defense did not know about it or really even care about it. He was there, in their mind, just to do his simple task, and also on the side to help the prisoners with their whatever medical needs they had. So yes, his time was limited. He was in a rush, and he felt a responsibility to get his own part of the mission done, for his own curiosity and also for the benefit of others in the future who might be evaluating and treating people similar to these men.
Is there any indication in the notes that lead to sort of a relationship? I mean, there's always going to be a relationship between patient and psychiatrist, but with somebody like Göring, who everybody knows who he is, and Kelley, they obviously spending a lot of time together. I mean, I've interviewed people who've spent time psychologizing, murderers, and they say you can't leave this work at home. And Kelley, because I found out what happens with Kelley, he doesn't. But it must have eaten into him.
The nature of his relationships with these men, especially Göring, was troublesome, and gave Kelley a lot of sleepless nights, because on one hand, he was there at the behest of the U.S. Army. His job really was to aid the prosecution and to make the trial possible by certifying the prisoners as fit to stand trial. But he was also their physician. That creates another kind of relationship. And he was also a researcher with a loyalty to himself and his own project. It was very complicated and mixed up at times. So while he was acting as this researcher, as the prisoner's physician, he was also providing information to the prosecution that definitely helped them in the trial. It helped the prosecution in the trial.
We know that Göring cheats the hangman's noose. How did Kelley react to that? Do you have any indication to that? Because obviously we know how it's going to pan out. We know that Göring is going to be executed. He's the highest ranking Nazi officer there. But the manner of his death, he's formed this relationship. Any indication?
Göring had told Kelley from the start that he was going to escape the hangman's noose,
Right.
regardless of what kind of penalty he was given. And so the Allies knew this, and they were constantly shaking his cell down, looking for contraband, cyanide, other means that Göring could use to kill himself. But they didn't find everything. And so one of the central questions for me going into this book was, what's the connection between Hermann Göring's chosen means of death, suicide by cyanide, on the night before the execution, and Dr. Kelley's own chosen means of death? I don't think it's really a spoiler for me to say that Dr. Kelley, at the end of his life, also took cyanide and killed himself. That's an unusual way that both of them chose to end their own lives. So I wanted to know, was there a connection? In Göring's case, he was making, and Kelley definitely believed this, Göring was making a statement to the Allies. He was not going to go out their way. He considered execution by hanging to be the fate of a common criminal, not of someone who had been a head of state or near head of state. And Kelley was impressed in a way that Göring had it in him to show this kind of defiance. And when the time came for Kelley after Nuremberg and in the years after, suffered depression and alcoholism, marriage problems, career problems, lots of problems. And he began thinking about how he would handle his end. He remembered that, and that those kinds of thoughts played a role in his own suicide.
It's chilling, isn't it? Because we would look. I mean, it's the ego and the arrogance of Göring to think he's going to go out like a great Roman emperor, biting into a capsule. I mean, if he couldn't have clasped an asp to his breast or something like that, it'd have to be a pretty big asp. You can argue, though, Kelley is PTSD. He has shell shock. He has PTSD from this. Alcoholism. It's textbook. And in a way, he's seen this quote unquote noble German doing what noble quote unquote noble Germans do, and his mind is unbalanced. He gets hold of cyanide and, Yasta, as we say in these parts of the world, he takes his life, but not in a quiet, sort of dignified way. I believe it was during a Super Bowl match. His family were there. I mean, horrendous circumstances.
Right. It was on New Year's Day. A football game was in process on TV that Kelley's family had gathered to watch, and he'd gotten into an argument with his wife, and his suicide using cyanide was also a semi-public statement because he did it in front of his family. And I was fortunate to have Doug, the son, as one of my sources because he was a witness to it. He was only 10 years old at the time, but it was burned into his memory. And so that's part of the similarity between these two men that intrigued me, and part of the puzzle of why each decided to end their lives in the same way.
Now, some might say, well, why are we wasting our time? Why are people making films about this history? It's a long time ago. But history doesn't repeat itself, but the echoes are very, very familiar. And if you look at the way that the Nazis hold power and they justify by their logic that what they are doing is a natural progression of things and they are above other people, etc., it is very chilling. And remember, Germany is a civilized society. And now you are writing this book in the 21st century, when things perhaps are looking a little shaky for what you might call democratic institutions.
Yes, that's absolutely true. This, after all, is a story about what motivates people to become authoritarians, and what motivates people to support authoritarians, and what civilized society can do to hold wrongdoers like that responsible for their war crimes and other horrendous acts. So when Dr. Kelley came home to the U.S., he found incipient fascism all around him, and in fact, he believed that that tendency has always run through U.S. history and would continue to do so in the future. So he laid out a program that he gave talks. He wrote a book that contained suggestions about this called 22 Cells in Nuremberg. And really what he talked a lot about was the development of programs and legislation in the U.S. to encourage eligible voters to vote. Actually, in the U.S. right now, the opposite is happening. There are laws in many states that discourage or make it difficult for eligible voters to vote. And he also promoted the idea of psychiatric evaluation of political candidates, which admittedly would be difficult to do and opens up problems in itself. But he believed that we should look at the mental condition of our political candidates, and if we did so, there are a lot of people who we probably wouldn't elect.
Final question. Because you've written before, obviously, you're well known for your writing. When you pressed send on the keyboard to your publisher, I'm just imagining this thing, how do you feel? Because this is not a book you go, oh great, I've done it, it's finished, yippee. Because this is deeply disturbing on the one level because of Göring and Dr. Kelley. But as I said before, this is a look into the psyche. This is something that we are seeing, as you just said so eloquently in the last bit of audio there. This is something that we're having to deal with again and again and again. It's unsettling, surely.
And it has become more so as time has gone on. My book was first published in 2013. I'm trying to remember how I felt when I pressed send. I think I was very uncertain about how the book would be received, or even if it would resonate. I knew that I was exploring a corner of World War II history that hadn't been thoroughly explored before, but I did not know how resonant it would become in the future. And as it happened, when the book was published in the U.S. in 2013, it's not like it was a bombshell landing on the literary scene. It was reviewed in one publication that had a national audience, and that was a publication called Science News, not exactly a beacon of literature. And but I knew that the book had potential to reach many people because of the large number of foreign language sales that came afterwards. It's available in most of Europe in, I think there are 21, 22 languages now. And so I could see that readers in a lot of different places were tuning in to it and had a heightened interest in it. But really, when I wrote the book, I didn't know what to expect.
Well, the book, and there's now a major motion picture as well. It'll be on our screens in November in the UK, and here in Spain it's November the 15th it's coming out. Jack, I'm going to run out of time. If people want to find you online, I know you've got a website because I was checking out. And by the way, listeners, you can order the book via our own virtual bookstore. You click on the front page and it will be winging its way to you for wherever you are in the world. But if people want to find you, Jack, and find out more about the other stuff that you do, because you do some really amazing work, so where can they find you?
Well, thank you. Well, the best place is on my own website, which is elhai.com, and that's el-hai.com. And there are links on the website to my information about my different books, other things I've written, as well as a free monthly newsletter I write called Damn History, which is for readers and writers of popular history.
The book is called The Nazi and Psychiatrist, as they say, now a major motion picture. Jack, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today.
It's been my pleasure, Giles. Thank you.